persecuted for your beliefs, jailed for your faith, and exiled from your homeland, but you refuse to turn to bitterness or vengeance. Instead, His Holiness has emerged as a leader of wisdom and compassion, a champion of nonviolence among nations.
No society can truly succeed unless it guarantees the rights of all of its peoples, including religious minorities, whether they're Ahmadiyya Muslims in Pakistan, or Baha'i in Iran, or Coptic Christians in Egypt.
I would like very much to confirm my support for the work that His Holiness and the Ahmadi Muslim community are doing, particularly in London.
Even I didn't know when I was elected, then my name even will be proposed. The election is the same as the Pope is elected, but without smoke.
I know you are a regular visitor and speaker to parliaments and assemblies around the world, whether it's the US Congress or the European Parliament.
Let it be clear that I am not speaking in support or favor of any particular individual country. What I wish to say is that all forms of cruelty, wherever they exist, must be eradicated and stopped, regardless of whether they are perpetrated by the people of Palestine, the people of Israel, or the people of any other country.
In this we are allied with His Holiness, a courageous champion of religious freedom and of peace.
I'm very glad that the movement like yours will do something to correct this image. Islam means peace.
I should thank Your Holiness for your highly enlightened sermon, not only for the Ahmadis, but I would say for all mankind.
Love for all and hatred for none. And this message not only for Muslim, but for everybody.
You are a man, though of humble beginnings, your leadership has made you a figure of global prominence, and you have become a guide for millions of Muslims worldwide.
Could you tell me what your, since I'm afraid I wasn't in there for your, message in the mosque, tell me what it was, what you were telling the people here in Calgary.
I normally pay a visit to my people to enhance their spiritual level, to let them understand their responsibility towards their fellow beings, to become more humble, to become more honest, to become more law-abiding, to become more helpful to the needy people. So this is the message, and of course to recognize your Creator more than before.
The Canadian Office of Religious Freedoms was actually opened in one of your mosques, and I'm wondering what that means to you.
Yes, you see, it was the government who requested that they want to inaugurate their new office, and since we Ahmadis are also one of the, as a group, the victims of the persecution in some countries, so they requested that it would be better if the office is opened from our place. So we happily accepted that one, and so otherwise we didn't mean anything from the government. We didn't want anything from the government.
Do you think that Ahmadiyya is a true reflection of a persecuted sect?
Ahmadis, so if you know about Ahmadis, you know, in 1974, the then government of Pakistan, which was Bhutto regime, they enacted a law against Ahmadis that it was the first ever example, I think, in the history of the political governments, that a political government is taking decision for a certain religion, that whether they are of this faith or not. So they decided and passed the law, and the law was enacted in September 1974, that Ahmadis are not Muslim for the purpose of law and constitution. And later on, when Bhutto was overthrown by Ziaul Haq, he also appeased the mullahs. To appease mullahs, he further reinforced that law by implementing it, that you cannot name yourself as Muslim, name himself. You cannot practice what you want to do. So even this is why the head of the Ahmadiyya community, my predecessor, had to migrate from Pakistan, because he could not practice, preach, or even profess his religion, or to train his own people by using Islamic terminology and Islamic teaching.
If I can go back on something you told me about the prophecy that Muslims will be here by name and not by practice. Is that what is happening right now, do you think?
You see, you can see everywhere. Quran says that you should promote peace. And there are so many verses in the Quran which say this. The Quran says the leaders should properly look after their people, the public. Quran says that give due rights to poor. And in all these Muslim countries, do you think or do you see any of these things is happening? No. Even rights of the people are being denied in Pakistan, as we are being persecuted. In Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Syria, in Egypt, in so many countries. So they are not practicing Muslim now. They are, although they claim that they are Muslim and they are doing according to the teachings of Islam, but they are, I can say, is misconstruing the true teachings of Islam.
For people in Canada looking at their news page and at their news feed on Twitter and social media and such, it is literally full of incidents that are even closer to home. Well, from Niger to the Boston Marathon bombing, to a threat on the Via Rail train, to the horrible murder of a soldier just a few days ago. All done in the name of your religion, purportedly.
This is what I am saying. This is why the reformer was to come, and he has come. This is what we claim. He said that he has come for two main purposes: to let the people understand the responsibilities he owed to his Creator. A person owes to his Creator. Secondly, make the people understand the responsibility they owe to each other. So he says that person has two rights. One, the right of God, the Creator, and the second is the right of the people. So you have to discharge these two rights. So if you are not doing it, that means you are not following the true teachings of Islam.
But not doing what? What in modern day 2013 needs to be done to stop that kind of violence?
This is what we have been trying all the time. If you listen to my addresses, to my speeches, I have been always talking about the peace and how to create peace, not only to the Western nations, but to the Muslim leaders, to the Muslim people. I've been reminding them all the time, what is your true teaching and what you are doing.
Is that enough, going around and preaching
yes, this we can only do up to which extent we can, right? So with the limited resources, the limited means we have been trying our level best.
Security agencies say that they are changing their tactics, that they are doing different kind of tracking and basically trying to do predictive analysis about who is a threat and who is going to launch one of these do-it-yourself or homegrown attacks. Should the Muslim world be changing its tactics too and looking around at itself?
There are some few Muslim groups who are doing all these things in the name of Islam. Even what happened just 2 days ago in the UK, in London, a soldier was killed. Muslim Council has very forcefully rejected that action. They say it is all wrong and we condemn it. So they have done well. But even then, I can say within the Muslim Council, there are some people who will be in favor of this action.
And that's what I'm wondering. Does the Muslim community as a whole, Ahmadiyas and any sect really, do they need to reject it more strongly? Do they need to become part of the solution more than what has been happening?
We have been doing our level best what we can do in every part of the world.
Is your level best working?
Yes, we are working everywhere. Even those who were, victimized, for instance, in United States, 9/11 incident happened, right? We collected last year 10,000 blood bags for the people of the United States, and we did a drive with the name Muslim for Peace or not Muslim for Life. And this year we intend to collect 25,000 bags of blood, and our youngs and our community members, and even though others also, are coming to take part in it. And this Muslim for Life is a big drive in the United States and is being appreciated everywhere in the United States. And the people know, if you go to UK, United Kingdom, there they know what Jamaat Ahmadiyya community is doing for creating the peace in the society. And we are giving a huge sum of amount to so many charities, local charities. And just recently, our youth organized a marathon in one of the town in United Kingdom, just near London. And there we collected almost, our target is £300,000. And the mayor was there, and they praised our effort, and everybody liked it. Even last year, the mayor of London, Boris Johnson, was there, and he appreciated our effort. So those people who know us, they know that we have been trying our best to create peace in the society. Not here, but in African countries, you would know, you would see.
Yeah. These are all very good works. Do you hope that this is the solution?
You see, even do you think we have the power? We don't have the power. Our job is to preach. The Ahmadiyya community is a religious organization whose work is to preach the true teaching of God, right? And this is what we have been doing. Even if, and this is why I always tell the big powers also that you can do, if you take appropriate measures to curb the situation, to make reform among the people, because these are the governments who are helping those governments in the Muslim governments. And if they ask them to to put firm hand on these organizations and groups, they can do it. But we are also victimized, we are also being persecuted. So we don't have power even. We are the people who are being victimized. We are the people who are persecuted in so many countries. And despite that we have been doing what we can.
So you'll have to forgive me. Who is it that has the power to put a firm hand on this?
You see, all the station governments are the member of United Nations.
This is a political issue.
Yes.
Not a religious issue.
Not religious. No religious. It's a matter of politics, not religion. These groups want some powers. They have their own vested interests for which they are fighting for.
Why are Muslim youth so vulnerable to radicalization then, if it's a political issue?
Not Muslim youth. There are some groups of Muslim youth, yes, and there is also a reaction. You know, some of the people think youth might be youth, you can say, but it's not specifically the youth. There are people of all ages who think that what is happening in Afghanistan is not right, and those Western governments who are playing their role there, it is wrong in their view. So,
and in your view?
In my view, the strategy should be different. See, what is happening in Syria, and now the Western governments can go there. In my view, it is wrong, and I agree with the Israeli president who said that UN forces should go there, but the forces should comprise of the Arab people, not the Western people, so that the neighboring countries can should take measures against that country, or should help the people of that region.
Is there any role to play in mosques, in families, to stop the exporting of violence?
You see, our approach is up to our mosques. If you have listened to my sermon, we have been trying everywhere in the world. Even, I can just tell you one incident. In Ghana, we have very big community there. One of our Ahmadi member, who happened to be the minister at that time, he says we were discussing about the crimes in the country, and the data was brought before us, and for his surprise, the majority of the criminals were from among Muslims. But he said to the Director General of the prison that you just find out and bring me the report that is there any Ahmadi among these criminals who have committed heinous crime? And after some days, the data was brought to him, and he says, according what I expected, and very rightly according to his expectations, there was no Ahmadi involved any of that heinous crime. Right? So this is the society we want to create in the world. And there are now hundreds of millions of Ahmadis in the world, and you would not see they are involved in any of the heinous crimes, which is disturbing the peace of the society. Although there may be some options, one or two, I cannot say 99.99% right, but there can be some percentage who are not good. But if we come to know about them, we just take firm actions against them, excommunicate them, and if possible, hand over to the administration.
How do you stop the side that is not? I understand what you are doing. I understand that you have a peaceful message. not everyone in your faith does. And so is your message of peace enough to counteract a message of revenge?
You see, here, if it is not enough, we should just leave it? No. Our aim is, our objective is to reform the world. So if not this generation, next generation, we are not going to give up our, this approach.
This is the path.
Yes, we have taken the path, we have been given this path in our teachings in the Holy Quran, and the reformer, the founder of Islam and the founder of Ahmadiyya community. And really that one person who claimed almost 125 years ago was a single man. The condition of the world at that time was also, according to those conditions, was the same. But when he passed away, he was almost 500,000, right? And after his demise, 105 years have passed. And now we are in hundreds of thousands. See? Even millions, more, very many millions. But you see, this is how we are trying to change the world. At least I can say 100 or 50 million, 160 million people are now, they call themselves Muslims, but are against all these type of brutalities, atrocities being committed by those so-called religious groups.
I think our time is up. So, Your Holiness, I thank you very much for your time. It was very interesting. I wish we had double the time so I could keep asking you those questions.
So you're trying to find out something different from me, but my answer is the same.
I now have the honor of inviting His Holiness Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad, the head of the worldwide Ahmadiyya Muslim community, to deliver the keynote address.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. All the distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessing of Allah be upon you all. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of the distinguished guests who have joined us here this evening. This year, the Peace Symposium is taking place after an interval of just 5 months. And so, I am particularly grateful to our old friends who have again accepted our invitation after a relatively short period of time. I believe that one reason you attend this event is because you wish to bear the views of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in relation to establishing peace in the world and its efforts in this regard. However, I also believe that some of you are interested to learn about whether what was said at the previous Peace Symposium has led to any positive outcome or yielding fruitful results. It is good to have a keen interest in such matters, and certainly all people should desire that any efforts to promote peace prove successful and are blessed. It is certainly my personal hope that our efforts have had some positive impact in the world. Nevertheless, despite our collective aspirations for peace, the truth is that much of the world is continuing to spiral towards a state of further conflict, disorder, and darkness. On a positive note, since our last peace symposium, there seems to be one small ray of light flickering in the distance, and which gives rise to a note of cautious optimism. One of the points I made at the last peace symposium was that the world should urgently target and seek to block the funding and supply line of the terrorist group known as ISIS or IS. I do not claim that it is because of me or the fact that I drew attention to this matter, but certainly over the past few months there have been tangible efforts to tackle this crucial issue. For example, in February, the United Nations Security Council unanimously passed a resolution directly targeting the funding of ISIS and ordering sanctions to be levied on any groups who sought to illegally purchase oil from it or engage in any other form of trade. If this resolution is properly implemented, then, as I have said before, I believe that it will not take years to defeat ISIS, but rather its cruelties can be brought to an end in a matter of months. So if they are truly sincere in their desire to establish peace in the world, all Muslim countries and their allies should seek to implement these measures to the best of their abilities. Certainly, in the it is the heavy burden on the Muslim world to give their full support and commitment to this cause. This is because the so-called government or state that has been established by ISIS is not only committing the most reprehensible and barbaric acts of cruelty, but is doing so in the name of Islam. This is a cause of extreme sorrow for true Muslims, as they know that such heinous acts have no link whatsoever to their religion. Recently, a French journalist who had been kept as a prisoner by ISIS for 10 months before being released spoke about this, his experiences whilst in captivity. He said that he never saw a copy of the Quran during his entire time as a prisoner of ISIS. And when he asked the terrorists how they justified beheading people and their various other cruelties, they never had any answers. They would simply say that they were enforcing their will as they pleased and would continue to do so. The United Kingdom should be particularly concerned because, according to the journalist's account, extremists who had traveled to Syria from Britain were committing some of the worst atrocities and were even more brutal than the other extremists. Clearly, this is an issue of grave concern for the British authorities. On an almost daily basis, in the news, there are reports of youths, both male and female, who have been radicalized here and have either traveled to Syria or Iraq, or who have been arrested here for various terrorism-related offenses. Radicalization is therefore a serious problem for the United Kingdom, for Europe, and indeed the world, the wider world. And so governments are rightly voicing their concerns and are debating the means of tackling this issue. However, the proper and appropriate measures are still not being taken to confront it. For example, here in Britain, the police and intelligence agencies have admitted that some of the radicalized people who have gone to Syria and Iraq were not properly monitored. And if they had been, they could have been prevented from leaving the country. Anyway, and as I have indicated already, it is not just the Muslim world that should be worried about the current state of affairs. Rather, it is a cause of serious alarm for the entire world, because if the extremists who have gone abroad return to their countries of origin, it could lead to dire consequences and potentially great danger to that society. In terms of the reaction of the world leaders to ISIS, it has been pleasing to see that certain politicians and religious figures have chosen not to add fuel to the fire, but have instead made it clear that they do not believe that ISIS or any other terrorist group represent the true teachings of Islam. For example, during a recent speech in Washington, President Obama said very clearly that the terrorists were betraying their religion and had no link with Islam. Just a few days ago, the Catholic Archbishop of New York also spoke openly against the notion that Islam justified the terrorist activities of groups like ISIS. And here in Europe, certain broad-minded politicians and religious leaders have also reacted responsibly to the terrorist attacks falsely perpetrated in the name of Islam. For example, in January, as I'm sure you will all be aware, terrorists attacked the offices of the magazine Charlie Hebdo in Paris. It was a horrifying attack and completely against the teachings of Islam. When the issue of free speech arose in the days that followed, Pope Francis said that we should not provoke one another or insult each other's faith. He said that the dignity of each faith and religion
should be respected and that we should speak for the common good. He very rightly said, as has been said by our respected guest Siobhan McDonald, that if even his very good friend uttered a bad word against his mother, he should expect a punch in return. In my personal view, this was a very wise and intelligent statement and an effort by the Pope to support religious freedom and tolerance. Anyway, in terms of extremism, let it be absolutely clear that wherever and whenever anyone seeks to justify their hate-filled atrocities or injustices in the name of Islam, they should be condemned. Let it also be very clear that such acts have no relation whatsoever to the true and peaceful teachings of Islam. As I alluded to earlier, I do not believe that policymakers and governments are currently taking all the necessary steps required to stop extremism. In my view, it would be far more effective for the major powers to support the local governments by taking them into confidence and seeking to build a relationship of mutual trust. Through close cooperation, a joint strategy should be formed to stop the spread of extremism and its hate-filled ideology. This will surely prove more effective than opposing the local governments by giving military training and weapons to the local rebels. Such policies can only further inflame the existing turmoil and tensions in those countries. Indeed, we have already seen the dangers and folly of this policy. Some time ago, certain major powers gave military training to members of the Syrian opposition. And it was later widely reported that many of those same rebels had taken their newly acquired arms and training and joined terrorist groups. Yet, despite this precedent, it has now been announced that thousands more Syrian rebels are going to be given military training in Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. I believe it would have been far more constructive for the major powers to build bridges with the local governments and to help them end the terrorism in their countries. This support could have been given on the condition that the respective governments guaranteed that they would serve their citizens fairly and would not usurp their rights in any shape or form. Where in Syria, Iraq, or certain other countries, the public have stood up against their governments, it has led to a power vacuum, which has been fully exploited by extremists to its great benefit. The civil disorder and lawlessness in those countries has allowed terrorist organizations to establish a foothold and created the perfect environment for them to flourish. As I have said, people from Europe, Australia, even China, and other parts of the world have traveled across borders to join ISIS, and the repercussions of this will certainly be felt in Europe and the West. Therefore, there is no doubt that this is not just an issue of concern for the Muslim world, but rather it is a global issue and has the potential to increase conflict across the world. In short, the measures to curb extremism are proving ineffective. If we look at the case of Libya, just a few years ago, some powers helped the local rebels to remove the Gaddafi regime. But what did this achieve? Has there been any benefit or improvement in the lives of Libyan people? Certainly not. Rather, that country has been left devastated, divided, and in ruins. It has become a breeding ground for terrorism and instability. It is said that even Gaddafi's hometown is now under the control of terrorists linked to ISIS, and this town is only 300 miles from Italy's coast. Thus, analysts have said that in this way, extremists have now virtually reached doorstep of Europe. If we look at Eastern Europe, there are radicalized individuals who are not only going to Syria and Iraq, but are also traveling to join terrorist groups in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Indeed, Pakistan and Afghanistan have long been extremely unstable countries where terrorism and extremism have been prevalent. This too is a continuous cause of great concern. Then if we turn towards Africa, terrorist groups such as Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab are acting entirely against the teachings of Islam by perpetrating the most barbaric cruelties. The ramifications and effects of this will not remain confined to these African countries, but rather will be felt in the wider world. And it is not just in the Muslim world that we see disorder and conflict. For example, the situation in Ukraine remains unresolved and highly dangerous. Although a tentative ceasefire was recently signed, a further escalation of the conflict and a future war cannot be ruled out. The major powers would be unwise to underestimate the threat posed by that region. Much has been written and said about how more than 25 years after the end of the Cold War, political tensions and other serious issues have engulfed the region once again. The economic situation being one of them, and this cannot be taken for granted. Another issue we are seeing is that various governments are increasing their military spending. For example, China's government recently announced that it was vastly increasing its military budget for the forthcoming year. However, its budget remains less than some of the other big countries. The point is that nations are competing with one another and seeking to outdo each other in terms of their defense spending. This race to increase military budgets is not without reason, but in fact
there are underlying motives behind it. If we truly want peace, then the United Nations and the major powers need to urgently tackle these issues in a just and fair manner. If we observe the situation in the Middle East, it is clear that the hatred and hostility between Israel and Palestine is continually increasing, and at frequent intervals this enmity erupts into senseless violence and bloodshed. Then we are all aware that relations between Israel and Iran are highly volatile. For a long time, there has been a complete lack of trust, and mutual hostilities seem to be increasing on a daily basis. In short, the vast majority of the world is engulfed in a state of disorder and conflict. Regrettably, the world has failed to devise an effective plan or strategy to free mankind from this desperate state. Underlying issues and root causes are being ignored, or at least not given the serious attention they require. Every country believes that its policies are right and that others are in the wrong. Many countries believe that what is happening in other parts of the world will not affect them. Such beliefs and perceptions are mistaken and can only prove to be harmful. Even where attempts are made to establish peace, they are often futile because strategies to resolve the problems or situation take an unnecessarily long time. Thus, we should realize and recognize the critical need of the hour. And whenever planning to control the situation, it should be in a minimal time. We must also accept that peace can only be built upon the solid foundations of honesty, integrity, and justice. These are the keys to peace. Until there is honesty and justice, no solution will ever prove beneficial. In terms of our community, we, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, have no power or worldly influence. Our objectives are purely spiritual, and so we do not seek power or government. We have no political ambitions or objectives. As a religious community, we desire only that the world comes to recognize its Creator and that people fulfill the rights of one another. To fulfill these twin objectives, we make every possible effort in all parts of the world. We seek to inform others that Islam's teachings have no link with the violence and disorder witnessed in the world. And so, I shall now present a few of the basic teachings of Islam in relation to the establishment of peace. However, before doing so, I would like to make it clear that the blame for the disorder in today's world cannot be solely attributed to Islam or Muslim alone. In fact, there are many other reasons and factors that are fueling the unrest prevalent in much of the world. I have already indicated towards this point by saying that it is only when justice and honesty prevail, that we can move towards a truly peaceful and harmonious world. There is no doubt that major powers and certain political and religious leaders are motivated by greed and their vested interests. Their selfish desires have contributed to the desperate state of affairs that we are witnessing, and so responsibility also lies with them. The world is being consumed by various issues that are leading to frustration and resentment, which in turn are undermining peace. For example, the effects of the financial crisis continue to be felt in much of the world. In Europe, discontent is increasing and the integrity of the European Union is being challenged and undermined. Anti-immigrant or nationalist parties are gaining popularity in many countries. I have already mentioned the conflict in Ukraine and the global arms race. These are all threats to world peace that are not linked to Islam, but rather have developed as a result of an unquenchable thirst for power, influence, and resources. If we reflect upon the policies of the major powers, we see that whilst they do not overtly subjugate weaker nations, they do seek to influence them unduly by exerting their control and taking advantage of their resources. This is not anything new that I am saying, but is quite apparent to all. And so, wherever in the world there is conflict and violence, whether conducted in the name of Islam or not, the truth is that the perpetrators are never motivated by any religion, but only by their own desire to attain power. If we reflect upon all of these points, it compels any sensible person to question the direction the world is moving towards in order to pursue and fulfill materialistic desires. As far as Islam is concerned, we see that in this era, Islam's teachings are being constantly misrepresented and distorted. It is claimed that Islam promotes a violent jihad and bloodshed. However, nothing could be further from the truth. And so, let me make it clear that when the early Muslims were permitted to fight by Allah Almighty, permission was not granted just to protect the Muslims or Islam itself. Rather, this permission was for a defensive war was granted to protect the religious freedom of all people. In chapter 22, verse 40-41 of the Holy Quran, Allah the Almighty said that if the Muslims did not defend themselves at that stage, then no church, synagogue, temple, mosque, or any other place of worship would remain safe. Therefore, where Islam gave permission for a defensive war, it was granted in order to safeguard every single religion and to protect the right of all people to freely practice and profess their faith. If a Muslim seeks to harm any other person, regardless of their faith or belief, or if any Muslim tries to damage the sacred places of other people, then he or she acts in complete violation of this very clear Quranic injunction. In relation to this, there have been recent reports that ISIS has destroyed historical monuments and artifacts in ancient Iraqi cities. For more than 1,400 years, these cities were preserved and protected by successive Muslim rulers and governments, and now it has been destroyed in Islam's name. This can only be branded as an extreme cruelty and a transgression of Islam's teachings. No true Muslim could ever comprehend acting in this way. Regarding the true concept of jihad and Islam's peaceful teachings, I cited many Quranic references during my address at last year's Peace Symposium, and there is no need to repeat them all now. However, certainly the verse I have just mentioned makes it clear that what is commonly alleged about jihad is completely wrong. Furthermore, in chapter 10, verse 100 of the Holy Quran, Allah said to the Holy Prophet, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, that if Allah had desired, He could have enforced His will and compelled all of mankind to believe. Yet, Allah gave each person freedom of choice. And given this, what right did anyone have to force or compel others to accept Islam? Throughout his life, the Holy Prophet of Islam, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, greatly emphasized the need for justice and equity, and for all forms of cruelty to be stopped. Indeed, it is narrated that the Holy Prophet, peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, said that a person should help both the oppressed and the oppressor. It is obvious that helping the oppressed requires you to show love and compassion, to protect them, to free them from their difficulties, and to comfort them. However, the Holy Prophet ﷺ said that we should not stop there, but we should take the next step and even help the oppressor. And helping an oppressor requires that a person stop them from committing injustices and cruelties. These are the means of creating peace amongst people. If today's governments followed this basic principle and prioritized justice and helping others over and above their own interests, the world would be a far better place. Whilst all governments and leaders claim they are trying to establish peace and justice, the sad reality is that they continue to prioritize their own agendas, interests, and motives. In chapter 2, verse 189 of the Quran, Allah says that you should not consume the wealth of others through falsehood and injustice. And then in chapter 15, verse 89, Allah the Almighty says that you should not covet the wealth or resources of others. When I quoted this verse in my Capitol Hill address, one congressman came to me and said, you have very rightly pointed out not only the teaching, but reality. In chapter 5, verse 9, Allah the Almighty has said that you should not let the enmity or hatred of others incite you to act otherwise than with justice. What a truly magnificent standard of justice and honesty this is. And for the sake of protecting the sanctity of religion and to prevent disorder in the world, Allah the Almighty has said in chapter 6, verse 109, that you should never insult or speak ill of the idols or deities of others, because then they may be provoked into insulting Allah, and this will lead to a never-ending cycle of enmity and hatred. Then the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, said, when you abuse or disrespect someone's father, you abuse your own father. See how beautifully limits of freedom of speech and respecting honor have been laid down. Thus, whosoever trespasses it contravenes the commands of Allah and the Prophet. In chapter 60, verse 9, Allah the Almighty has said that those who do not persecute or seek to obstruct your faith should always be treated with fairness, respect, and kindness. Thus, it is entirely contrary to Islam's teachings to be cruel to those who are living peacefully amongst you in the Muslim countries, whether they are Christians, Jews, Yazidis, pagans, or the people of any other belief, or even atheists. Thus, there are golden principles and teachings that are required to establish peace in the world. I have presented just a few aspects that highlight the beauty and nobility of Islam's teachings. These teachings are the means of protecting all people in the world, and it is due to these very teachings that true Muslims act as guarantors and guardians for the peace and security of all segments of society. Seated before me are various politicians, influential figures, and well-educated people, and so I wish to reiterate that you should all try your level best to influence your governments and leaders positively towards establishing justice and honesty at all levels. These are the keys to solving the many international and domestic crises of our time. For many years, I have warned that we are heading towards a horrific destruction, and now many politicians and analysts are reaching the same conclusion, that we are heading rapidly towards a third world war, whilst some are saying that another world war is now unavoidable. I believe that even now there is time for the world to wake up to the stark reality it faces and to arrest this threat. To do so, all people and their leaders will need to stop looking only in one direction and caring only for their own interests. Instead, they will need to broaden their outlook and to have a realistic and fair approach in all of their matters. They must seek to fulfill the requirements of justice, fairness, and honesty at all levels of society. They should seek to establish peace wherever and however they can. And the foremost thing is to recognize their Creator as He should be recognized. I hope and pray that may Allah enable all of us to understand and recognize the gravity of our responsibilities and to fulfill our duties. May Allah bless you all. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, His Holiness will now lead us in silent prayer before the food. We pray by raising our hands, and you may join us in any manner you feel comfortable.
The silent prayer. Ameen.
I noticed His Holiness didn't pull any punches.
But let's hope the politicians that were here go back and speak to their political leaders and take some of that message back to them. We all know what is wrong, how it can happen, or what can happen. But I think we in the whole of the world suffer or are under a great threat. But I think the biggest enemy of us is our own apathy and our failure to deal with this situation.
Speech by His Holiness setting out his view as a faith leader, an important faith leader, on how we can put in place the foundations of peace. He talked about honesty, integrity, justice. I think those messages are never more relevant than they are today, particularly as we all struggle and discuss how we can confront extremism.
Well, if I can go back right to the beginning of the symposium, the important thing was the quote from the Quran, that nothing in religion is compulsory. I think that's very important to remember, that we have to tolerate other people's thinkings. There are many roads to God.
Well, I would agree with him that what we need to do is to examine the ideological background to persecution of all kinds, but religious persecution in particular. If we get at the ideologies and we stop people thinking in the terms of attacking other communities, then we'll cure the military problem as well.
The greatest impression really is the commitment of an entire community to do the work that is so clear that they do, you know, the charity work, the integration with Britain, the acceptance of the existence of other beliefs without criticism. It's a fantastic message, and I think it's something that everybody should be aware of, and the fact that His Holiness isn't getting any time on national TV or on world media is crazy, quite frankly.
Clearly, what the Ahmadiyyas have been doing is quite exceptional, and I know from my long contact, which goes back over 10 years at least, just how much work the community has been doing in promoting religious harmony and interfaith dialogue. Clearly, it's an example to other groups, particularly within Islam, where I don't think sometimes that the level of dialogue we need, even at a domestic level, is quite as good as I would like.
If you think about how we in this country, in Britain, think about Islam, it's generally negative. And that's not the fault of Islam, that's the fault of the media and of course the people that do stupid things like the French bombings and French killings. The Quran does not say we should do harm to people, and he spoke specifically about some of the verses, and I think again for people like me that have had no contact with Islam, it reassures us that hey, this is not all bad, this is actually good, and it's all in the interpretation. So I think when he quoted from the Quran, it had quite an impact on me as I started to understand, well, I understood more that actually Islam isn't bad or isn't good, it's the people who interpret it that put a bad interpretation or good interpretation, and that was the keynote thing for me.
So I've always said that the Ahmadis aren't very well known. It's a learning curve for the political class. These kind of events raise the profile of their role both in Britain and across the world, and it's something which we should know better and we should cherish.
The point that I liked the most about the Caliph's speech was the fact that the media is very much pushing, you know, the negative aspect of Islam. And today, I mean, I know that anyway, but today I feel very clear that Islam, you know, is and the Ahmadiyya movement is very much a peaceful movement, and it has nothing to do with what we see in the media or what we hear in the media.
What was striking was that basically on our way here we were discussing the same points that he later addressed in his speech. So, for example, also the Western influence, the Western interventions, the result in Libya that is disastrous, the result in Iraq that's a disaster. So that in some way the rise of fundamentalist and extremist groups is related to Western intervention. And that was very interesting that all these points came up again in his speech, although, I mean, we had the line on these points.